The Holocaust was a huge blow to the Jewish people, killing 6 million people. But how did this happen, and how did Hitler convince the Germans to go along with his plan? For this, we're going to have to go back a little.
Because of the Treaty of Versailles, signed in 1919, Germany was struggling, and they were left with nothing.
The new German Republic was forced, under threat of continued Allied advance, to sign the Treaty of Versailles. Germany viewed the one-sided treaty as a humiliation and is blaming them for the entire war. The intent of the treaty was to assign guilt to Germany to justify financial reparations. The notion of blame took root as a political issue in German society. In the treaty, Germany was forced to pay 132 billion gold marks, which is $31.5 billion.
After World War I, Germany was left struggling financially. They were unstable in economic and political matters. There was hyperinflation, causing their money to be worthless because prices were so high. They were poor and didn't have enough money, food, and jobs. These terrible living conditions brought down the Germans' mental health. They believed life was not important anymore. The state of Germany left
including Adolf Hitler, the assassinator of 6 million Jewish people.
This gave him the chance to rise to power.
Ich weiß es, meine Kameraden, es ist euch wohl oft schwer gefallen, wenn ihr meint, es müsse nun ein Wandel kommen und er kann nicht und immer wieder muss erneut Appell gerichtet werden. Es muss weitergekämpft werden, es geht nicht, ihr dürft nicht handeln, ihr müsst gehorchen, ihr müsst euch fügen, ihr müsst euch diesem unerhörten Zwang beugen.
Adolf Hitler was born in Austria on April 20th, 1889. Hitler was not a true German, and so, in 1932, Hitler became a German citizen in order to be a politician.
During World War I, Hitler was a soldier in the war and he conveyed messages from the leadership to the front. On November 8, 1923, Hitler forcefully tried to take power from the government known as a coup, and it resulted in several deaths. Hitler and some of his followers were arrested, and instead of taking away Hitler's triumph, his being imprisoned made him a national figure.
While in prison, Hitler wrote the book Mein Kampf, which described the hatred towards the Jews.
One quote Hitler wrote in his book says, "Hence today, I believe that I am acting in accordance with the will of the Almighty Creator. By defending myself against the Jew, I am fighting for the work of Lord." Hitler really thought that when he went against the Jews, he was completing God's wishes.
After Hitler was released from jail in 1925, he realized he will never again do an armed uprising, and instead, he will use the freedom of speech and press to gain control of Germany.
When Hitler and the Nazi Party wanted to actually gain power with the government, he joined the National German Worker Party in the parliament democracy. Hitler and the National German Worker Party lost in the election because they did not have enough popularity. Therefore, the Nazi Party joined with another party in the parliament who had overlapping ideas, so they had a higher chance of Hitler becoming Chancellor of Germany. The Nazi Party rose to power because they promised to do what no other political party had been able to accomplish: to pull Germany out of the Depression and to give German jobs within 4 years. He ended up becoming Chancellor on January 30th, 1933. That night, people partied with fire torches around Berlin for the success and excitement over Hitler and Hindenburg, the president. Hindenburg was the president of Germany the years of 1925 till 1934, and his fan base was mostly wealthy people. But when the economic depression hit, the wealthy people became poor and Hindenburg's popularity shrunk. January 1933, Hindenburg and his advisors made a deal with Hitler that he was to become the president because he had the popularity Hindenburg needed and Hindenburg had the power Hitler needed. Hindenburg believed that Hitler was going to fail to end the Depression, and then, when he did fail, Hindenburg would come in and save the nation and get his popularity back. This was the biggest mistake, thinking they can control Adolf Hitler. When Hitler became president, he ignored the wishes of the other parties, only focusing on the Nazi ideology. Him and the Nazi Party lied to everyone about the statistics of the unemployment rate in order to convince the public that they are keeping their promise of bringing back the glory of Germany and that they are making progress. By the end of 1934, the government claimed that the unemployment rate went down halfway ever since Hitler was appointed. In reality, 1 in 3 people were unemployed. Hitler saw this and created jobs for the unemployed people, including rebuilding the military arsenal. But this wasn't only for the economic recovery of restoring jobs and money. The Nazis were violating the Treaty of Versailles, which stated that Germany had to reduce the size of their military and had to cease their use and creation of weapons, and even destroy their tanks. Germany concealed their violation of the treaty by calling it job creation. This cartoon shows Hitler slipping away secretly from the Treaty of Versailles conditions. If you look closely, you could see that it says Hitler's party on his hat. This shows that it was not only Hitler going against the laws, instead, his whole group.
In Article 48 of the German Constitution, it is written that if the president believes the security of the country is in jeopardy, he can get the army involved, and the president can be dictator for a short period of time. This is exactly what Hitler did. On February 27, 1933, the Reichstag building burnt down. That's when Hitler started showing his totalitarian ideas, and the Nazis took this as an excuse to blame the communists for this terrible fire. They arrested 20,000 people who had ties with the Communist Party. It didn't matter to the Nazis if the communists actually started the fire or not. They just saw the opportunity to get rid of their enemies and they took it.
The day after the fire, such arrests became legal, and by the end of the summer, 100,000 communist people were arrested. The Reichstag government passed a new law on March 24, 1933, that it was a crime to speak against the government or criticize the leaders. Even those who gossiped about the government were arrested. They were then sent to the first concentration camp. The Nazis used the first concentration camp to threaten and frighten Germans. Over the summer, German camp held 27,000 communist people. The Nazi Party was the only political party allowed in the country. Throughout the years, these restrictions kept on getting stricter. In 1933, laws prohibited Jews from having certain jobs, from owning land, and more. Furthermore, on September 15, 1935, the Nazis passed 2 new laws called the Nuremberg Laws that changed who can be a German citizen. These laws also determined who was a Jew. A person would be considered a harmful Jew if they had Jewish blood or relatives that were Jewish. In addition, these laws prohibited Jews from marrying or living with Germans. They prohibited Jews from flying the Reich flag, prohibited Jews from employing non-Jews in their homes, prohibited Jews from voting and stripped their citizenship, and prohibited Jewish children from attending public school.
Ist der Versuch der gesetzlichen Regelung ein Problem, das im Falle des abermaligen Scheiterns dann durch Gesetz zur endgültigen Lösung der Nationalsozialistischen Partei übertragen werden müsste. Hinter allen 3 Gesetzen steht die Partei, und mit ihr und hinter ihr die deutsche Nation.
I am Fritz Paul Klackstein, born January 24th, 1927 in Berlin, Germany. My father was Jewish, a liberal Jew. My mother was Lutheran. Before Hitler came to power in 1933, life was good. In 1933, I remember my father lost his job as judge, and they told him, "No, I have to leave the court." But look, there is a demonstration of Nazis outside. Why don't you go out the back door? You never know what's going to happen. Well, he said, I came
Hitler
in by the front
manipulated
door,
and convinced many
and I
people
will
that
leave
Jews
by
were
the front
ruining the
door."
economy,
And so he
and they
did.
were the problem causing
But that
Germany's
was the
downfall.
beginning.
He
The good
believed that
times
Jews were going to dominate the
receded
Germans
everything
and take over the
right
world.
away.
He also thought he was going to bring
Nuremberg
Germany
laws,
back to
they
the
more or less
economic
decided
wealth they once
their
had, and he was going to
relationships.
create the
Who
Third
is a
German
Jew?
Empire, which would
Who is
last
a
thousands
so-called
of years.
Mischling? I was a so-called Geltungsjude, counted as a Jew. Why? Because I was raised as a Jew. It started out that you had to take a special identification cards and you had to take the name Israel or Sarah. In police, you were required to take it out, show it, and say in a loud voice, "I am a Jew. My identification card number is so and so and so and so." Anti-Semitism, Nuremberg laws more or less legalized it. All you did, waiting every day, but what is next? What regulations? What rule comes next? People said, we lived here for years. We are citizens. We have served the army. Couldn't be. It was.
They even forced Jews to be identifiable, such as on their passports. The Germans also used propaganda to convince the people that Jewish people were evil and they're invasive.
One example of Nazi propaganda is this. In the picture, you can see the man bent. This is referring to the stereotypes that Jews are physically unfit. The map, with the hammer and sickle, is the USSR, which implies that the Jews are communist traitors. Also, the man's hand is filled with coins, but the man's begging, indicating that the Jews are greedy. Another example of Nazi propaganda is this. In this picture, it shows a snake with exaggerated features, referencing anti-Semitic stereotypes, such as dark curly hair, hooked nose, and a snarling expression. There is also a British flag symbolizing the Jews' loyalty to Great Britain as opposed to Germany. There is also a sickle and hammer to show that the Jews are communist.
This propaganda poster shows the Jewish people encircling the globe and taking over the whole entire world. On November 9, 1938, the Kristallnacht happened. A stereotyped Jew with a hooked nose conspires behind the scenes to control the Allied powers represented by the British, American, and Soviet flags. The caption reads, "Behind the enemy powers, the Jew." This one shows a biased Nazi educator teaching little children in their classrooms what a Jewish nose would look like. The Germans agreed with Hitler and followed through with his plan because this is how they felt they would create a strong society. There were many times where Jewish children were attacked and abused because of the racial issues in this time.
Hitler and his Nazis created an organization called Hitler Youth
Started in 1933, really.
young girls and boys
But
about
I had
Nazi ideology
very good
and
friends
convinced them of their
of
policies.
whom I knew that they were members of the Nazi Party since 1928. And she was one of my best friends. She didn't care that I was Jewish, and I didn't care that she was a Nazi. She was one of my sports friends, and we got along very well. But then, of course, in 1933, everything changed. Like overnight, you could not go into a public place, no restaurants, no swimming pools, no movies, nothing. You couldn't. You were not allowed in any public place anymore. And the people that you knew wouldn't talk to you anymore. Friends that you had, they would shun you, most of them. Not because they hated us all of a sudden, but they were all afraid because that was the way it was. You talk to a Jew and you'll be punished. And it was very hard.
What did you make of that?
Pardon me?
How did you feel about that?
Well, it was very hard. I was 19 years old, and all of a sudden I was shut off from everything. I got a letter from my sports club in Ulm that I wasn't welcome there anymore because I was Jewish, and that was the thing that I loved to do most, as I said before, sports. And all of a sudden that was finished. There was nothing I could do. We just were really vegetating, if you want to call it that.
Even their best friends went against them. The people they loved the most, the sports they loved the most, their hobbies they could not do anymore. This is so upsetting to hear, and we cannot even imagine this. Herbert Cohn describes his life as a Jewish kid during the Holocaust, and he describes how unfairly he was treated by the Nazis and the Germans.
So it affected your lives. These laws, this was just one law. There was other laws that had, the Nuremberg laws were very specific. They segregated more. First there was discrimination, then there was segregation, and then it led to real persecution, because persecution was also in those laws. For instance, my father lost his job. He could not call on non-Jewish businesses anymore. He couldn't travel at will anymore. Your various identification card denoted from then on that you were Jewish, had a big J stamped on it. And we have some of that even to this day as evidence. That was before the yellow stars. That was before even the middle name was changed to Israel and Sarah, respectively.
In early November 1938, a young Jewish man named Herschel Grinshpan walked into the German embassy in Paris and shot the third secretary of the embassy. His parents were Polish Jews who lived in Hanover in northern Germany. They had been rounded up and they had been taken to the border between Germany and Poland, and the Germans had tried to push them, along with about 30,000 other Jews, across the border into Poland. The Poles had refused to accept them. And they stood, therefore, for several weeks in no man's land. Grinspän was desperately upset about what was happening to his parents, and that's what prompted him to go to the embassy and shoot this person as a way of drawing international attention to what his parents were experiencing. And this, the German propaganda apparatus immediately drummed up as part of the international Jewish opposition to Germany.
The Nazi newspaper, the Völkischer Beobachter, published a report of this attempted assassination. And by November 8th, there were already wildcat attacks on Jews and Jewish property. So there was already stoking of popular resentment, hatred, and violence, street violence. As ill luck would have it, the party leadership was meeting just at that time in Munich, and it was a moment for them to show their loyalty to their Führer. The party leaders wrote, telephoned, telegrammed the local party bosses across the country, telling them to attack Jewish property and telling them that the police would not intervene, that the fire department would not quell the fires.
It turned into an explosion of violence. Most of the synagogues in the country were burned down that night. Jews' private residences were attacked, their furniture thrown into the streets.
Thousands and thousands of shop windows, about 200 synagogues burning in this way, right? It was a much more public act of violence.
He chose to start with the youth because they are easier to influence. The organization often made children turn against their parents and teachers, and they reported them if they heard them talking about the Nazi Party for the bad. In 6 years, the Hitler Youth Organization grew from 100,000 members to 7.5 million members.
Now, it was in the activities, I think, that my life differed from that of a normal boy who went to public school and went home after school was over and had a normal life at home. Our life was much more structured, and it was much more directed, so that whatever Hitler wanted to do with us, we imbibed in a very careful fashion. That is, we were not aware of being indoctrinated. We were not being aware of what was being done to us. It was all a very, very subtle process. By the time that the war ended in 1945, when I was 15, I had become a Nazi without ever really being aware that I was one. That is, I didn't know how I had become one. I knew that I was one, because to me Hitler was the great man in Germany's life. I had become convinced that Hitler was the savior of Germany. All of that I could believe because our knowledge of what had gone on in the past was very limited. We were carefully kept from, I think, knowing certain things or having a broad picture of history. We were not aware of what Germany had done before. Our history, our life really essentially started, as far as we were concerned, with the First World War, with the depressing period of the Weimar Republic, as we were told. Then, after Germany had been beaten down as a result of the Treaty of Versailles, had been disarmed, had been saddled with reparations, etc., etc., all of a sudden, or then finally, Hitler came along to lift Germany out of this muck and mire and bring it back to greatness. And we felt that we were part of that, and we were very proud of that, and thought that Hitler really was the greatest thing that had ever come down the pike.
These organizations were all over Germany, and they wanted everyone to be the same. They took away everyone's traditions, made everyone wear the same uniforms, and sing the same Nazi songs.
The child is verwandert, wie nachts am lichten Tag. Doch es geht auch ohne Sonne, wenn sie mal nicht scheinen mag.
They took away lots of time from the youth, causing them to miss church and other activities. By 1939, a new law passed requiring ages 10 to 18 to join the Hitler Youth. This organization became the only legal youth movement in Germany.
This is the time of year when the boys of the fatherland become state servants, because the state regards physical training as their #1 duty. And in camp, they live by numbers. On the word, splash. And in the other part of this camp in East Prussia, the girls live under almost exactly the same conditions as the boys.
In this video, we see that in the Hitler Youth Organization, the kids were counted by number to show that the Germans didn't care about their names or about who they were. They only cared that they had the same beliefs as them.
Hitler believed the only acceptable race was the Aryan race, blonde hair and blue eyes, and only had German blood.
We can learn from this that there will always be people who want to harm or kill us, and for no reason at all. They also tend to convince themselves of the reason that they justify. We even see in the Haggadah when it says, Bechol dor vador amdim alenu lechalotenu ve'akadosh baruch hu matzilenu mi yadam. In every single generation, people rise up to destroy us, but the Holy One, blessed be He, saves us from their hands.
שלא אחד בלבד עמד עלינו לכלותנו, עמד עלינו לכלותנו, והיא שעמדה לאבותינו, והיא שעמדה לאבותינו ולנו, שלא אחד בלבד עומד עלינו לכלותנו, עומד עלינו לכלותנו, והקדוש ברוך הוא מצילנו, מצילנו.